Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today, well, actually not today, last night on the Friday night live stream, I somehow stumbled into an old favorite of mine, a ship that has gone through quite the interesting journey here in World Warships, and a ship that maybe kind of sort of needs some love in the year of our Lord 2025, or as will shortly be in 2026. And that is none other than the legendary Tier 10 Soviet Destroyer, the Khabarovsk. Now, let me be clear, legendary, I'm just saying legendary because this ship was a real menace back in the day, I'm not going to lie. There were some changes made to her that were very much needed thanks to her old status as being probably one of the most single annoying ships to deal with back in the day. Like, this ship was a real pain in your side, as it is designed to be. So the whole thing about the Khabarovsk, before I get too much into how annoying it was back in the day, the whole thing about the Khabarovsk is that she has some excellent guns. Her main battery guns have all of the Soviet goodies, the good AP, the good shell ballistics and all that jazz, which means from longer ranges, the shells of the Khabarovsk are relatively easy to guide to their target. So what Khabarovsks are meant to do is, sit at longer ranges and use their excellent gunnery to whittle down their opponents. You can bully other destroyers thanks to, again, the improved ballistics and such of these Soviet shells. You can live rent-free in the heads of most large cruisers and battleships, and you can actually bully the crap out of light cruisers thanks to your excellent AP. Now, back in the day, Khabarovsk used to be able to do this from like 15, I believe 16 kilometers if you really built into it. And as you can imagine, that's pretty annoying dealing with a ship that's as fast as the Khabarovsk at 15, 16 kilometers when you're in something like a battleship or a heavy cruiser, whose guns, of course, takes a second to reload, and trying to hit, again, a single destroyer. As big as the Khabarovsk is, don't get me wrong, this is a very large ship, but, it's still moving very fast, as you can see in the background footage. Going that fast from that range is not something that's going to happen too often. And because of that, the Khabarovsk was able to do one of two things. It was able to, divert the fire away from its team to it, instead of that massive battleship broadside going towards a fellow ship. Instead, it's going toward the Khabarovsk, where most of the shells are probably going to miss, and if they do hit, well, it's a destroyer, right? It's probably going to overpin it. So you're providing your team a service by taking some of the heat off of them. And if the enemy ship doesn't ever actually dial you in, you are going to eventually whittle him down with your guns until he is, well, sunk. So that's what Khabarovsk did very well back in the day. Go find a flank you can run around and just be that little annoying mosquito buzzing in the enemy team's ear for the duration of the match. And you could, get past the enemy destroyers by keeping them at arm's length, using your superior ballistics to beat the crap out of them. And then, of course, you can move on to the bigger fish, the cruisers, and then eventually the battleships. So Khabarovsk was a menace for quite some time until, well, they decided that it was time for the fun to be over, and they nerfed the main battery gun range of the Khabarovsk by 2 kilometers. So you may be thinking, well, that doesn't sound too bad, Sealord, 2 kilometers. Well, it's taking its base main battery range from, what was it, like 13.05 down to, I think, 11.2. And you might be thinking, well, Sealord, that's not that bad. You can still take the range module, and then with, AFT and BFT, whichever, when you that extends your range, you can still get that out to, like, 14 and a half, 15 kilometers. Well, you can't take the range module with the Khabarovsk. It's not allowed to touch it like a lot of the other Soviet ships. So, you can't. Which means now, after taking AFT, your range is stuck around 13 and a half kilometers. Which, back when they made those changes, wasn't that big of a deal. However, those changes were made, I think, around update 6.0. If you guys haven't been paying attention to the update numbers, we are in the 14s now. So this is 5-6 years ago at this point. And if you haven't noticed, the game has changed a lot in the past 5 or 6 years. Khabarovsk, on the other hand, hasn't. Now, there was one excellent buff done to the Khabarovsk a little while ago. Last year, they gave her the specialized repair teams instead of her standard repair teams, which by standard, I mean, imagine like the most average destroyer heal. That's what the Khabarovsk got. But now, you have the specialized repair teams. So that was an excellent change. I'm not trying to downplay that. But that and one other change were the only two changes done to the Khabarovsk over 5-6 years. The other change was also a pretty good change. They gave Khabarovsk and the Harugumo the destroyer overpin formula versus the cruiser overpin formula, meaning that if you overpin like a cruiser with your battleship guns or guns larger than 280 millimeters, you eat a certain amount of damage. But now her and Harugumo only eat up to 10% of the maximum damage of the shell, so you stop getting screwed over by eating, large AP shells to your face, which was another good change. But those are the only two changes made to the Khabarovsk over the past, again, 5 or 6 years. And, well, how's it doing in 2025? Let me tell you about my favorite little destroyer here, the Khabarovsk. One of my most favorite destroyers here, the Khabarovsk. It's hanging in there by like a friggin' thread from my experience. Now, to be clear here, I am no destroyer main. I am no destroyer master or anywhere near that. I just like run and gun destroyers. So since I do like them, I do tend to play them more often than other types of destroyers. And let me tell you, like, the amount of work you have to do in a Khabarovsk to have, like, a decent game is so much more than in any other run-and-gun destroyer currently available in the game right now, including the Khabarovsk replacement in the Russian gunboat line, the Delny. Like, the Delny has a much more comfortable main battery gun range, which would obviously be like the first viable option someone who likes Russian gunboats would take. They would just look at the tech line, take the Delny, and be like, oh, well, this thing, has a way better gun range for today's World of Warships than the Khabarovsk does. But you can also turn around and find, like, the exact same playstyle in an eerily similar package that's just French with the Kleber. Like, the Kleber plays almost exactly like old Khabarovsk did. Except that in today's World of Warships, she still has the, 15-16 kilometer main battery gun range intact. Like, you can comfortably sit outside of the retaliation zone of most larger ships in the game, again, large heavy cruisers and battleships, and like farm to your heart's content. And it's got a lot of the same stuff going for it that the Khabarovsk does. It is a physically large destroyer, but it is very fast. And while it doesn't get a heal like the Khabarovsk does, it does get the French damage saturation mechanic, where it essentially takes way less damage than any other destroyer should. But you'll be getting hit way less in the Kleber because, well, you're able to farm at those longer ranges quite comfortably. And sure enough, the ballistics on these French shells for the Kleber are pretty dang comfortable to farm at those ranges with. And plus, it gets the reload booster too, so you can have some, powerful burst DPM in the Kleber. So you take a look at the Kleber, you take a look at the Khabarovsk, and it's like, wait a second, if I like run and gun gunboats, why in the world would I take the ship that I have to be way too entirely uncomfortably close to the enemy ship to really be, effectively farming them down with my, boat's gameplay style when I can play something that's eerily similar, but I can play it way more comfortably, and I don't have to put anywhere near the effort to have, the same, if not better results in 2025. Which is why you don't really see too many Khabarovsk running around. Now, if you do see Khabarovsk, they're in one or two categories. One, they've been playing the ship for forever, so they're actually, masters of that ship. Or two, there's some poor fool that got it in like a container or something and doesn't really know what they're getting into, and they go and try and play it like a normal destroyer and get, the absolute crap beat out of them. Which is another thing about the Kleber, it's way more versatile than the Khabarovsk. It can do some destroyer things because it's better suited for it in a few ways. One, it doesn't have these, knife-fighting torpedoes that the Khabarovsk has, which the only way you're going to use Khabarovsk torpedoes is if you, are sailing up to someone within, like, boarding range because of how short the torpedo tubes are. It only has 6 kilometer torps, which that's so close by tier 10 standards. Compare that to something like the Kleber, which has an 8-kilometer range. You might be thinking, Sealord, does 2 kilometers really make that much of a difference? Well, yeah, it does. Not to mention the fact that the Kleber has 12 torpedoes versus the 10 torpedoes of the Khabarovsk. So, yeah. And need I remind you that the Kleber does have the reload booster for its main battery guns, also known as the I win button. So if it does come across another destroyer from close range, it can click the reload booster and just vaporize them off the face of the map. Khabarovsk can't do that. It really does depend upon keeping other ships at arm's length to use its good speed and its good ballistics to keep it out of trouble. The problem is that this arm's length range really starts around 12-ish kilometers. And, back in the day, that's no problem with your 15, 16 kilometer main battery gun range. But nowadays, with your 13.5 kilometer gun range, yeah, you got like a kilometer of space that you can actually play with before they're either out of your range or they're too close to where they will start landing shell hits on you, because at, that range, their guns are pretty dang accurate. And most of them don't really have, enough time for their shells to really start losing a lot of velocity until you get, more to that 12, 13-ish kilometer range. So it's still kind of just point and click for a lot of ships at tier 10 within, that 12-ish kilometer range. That's what I'm saying. So when you're having to play that close, it's very uncomfortable for shell dodging, which is, of course, why Wargaming gave the Khabarovsk the improved heal to make up for the fact that, yeah, you are going to be eating a lot more shells nowadays because of that. But of course, that change was, about a year or so ago, and as I'm sure most of you are well aware, higher tier hasn't really gotten any less passive in the past year or so, and it most certainly hasn't gotten any less gimmicky in the past year or so as well. Now you have combat instructions that give, ships reload boosters. You have, like the Pan American battleship line, the Libertad, with freaking 14 kilometer secondaries. You can get outranged by a battleship's secondaries nowadays with the Khabarovsk. You have, hybrids. You have airstrikes. You've got all this and more. And the poor Khabarovsk hasn't really had the best of time adapting to all of this, especially considering the fact now that in so many cases, of course, you can't really rely upon your team for too much support, and the Khabarovsk is really best played behind a DD that's spotting and supporting it. That destroyer is doing the spotting and such, and the capping, and the Khabarovsk is protecting it by, bullying other destroyers out of existence that, dare show its face to try and hurt your destroyer. But, of course, that doesn't happen too much anymore at higher tier, unless, of course, you're playing in a division or something. So, the Khabarovsk is a ship that is heavily reliant on its commander's skill level nowadays. And you can say, well, that's a good thing, Sealord. You have to be a good commander to really do well in this ship. And I can see that argument, but the fact remains, why in the world would I bother with a Khabarovsk when I can play something like a Kleber that is close enough to do what I want to do in the Khabarovsk and is so much better for the current meta? So while the Khabarovsk may not be doing poorly in today's World of Warships, I do certainly believe that it is still firmly locked in kind of the irrelevant state, which is kind of sad seeing an older ship like this that's been with the game for forever. And I know you can get the legendary mod, which does extend the range by 10 kilometers, that'd be crazy, by 10%, but it also absolutely murders the runtime of the engine boost and the heal by 20%, which is, that's a lot of heal you're giving up. But I understand, at further ranges, it's kind of a fair trade-off, but I don't want to have to go grind research bureau points just for the ship to be relevant. These legendary upgrades are supposed to be, kind of more side grades to the ship, rather than, oh, you need this to actually have, a relevant ship in today's World of Warships. So I get that is there, but I really shouldn't have to grind extra just for my ship to be relevant in today's World of Warships, right? So what would fix it? A slight buff to the range, maybe like a half a kilometer more. Really, if I could get this out to 14.2 kilometers, I think that would be a lot more comfortable. 13.5 kilometers, think about how short that is at tier 10. Like we were talking about, what was it, the Laffy the other day, and after I put all the reload mod and stuff on, I'm like, okay, I have like a 12-kilometer range. That's all right for a cap fighter. And here we are talking about what's supposed to be a run and gun gunboat, and its maximum range without the legendary mod is 13.5 kilometers. Again, it can be outranged by battleship secondaries nowadays. So that's it's just in a pretty sad state, in my opinion. Again, not necessarily a bad state. Yes, if you know how to play it, yes, it's still a very strong gunboat, but man, I just wish it was doing a little bit better. But that is simply my 2 cents on the Khabarovsk, guys. I thought since I played it last night on stream, I'd played it a couple more rounds just to get a feel for how she's doing this late to 2025. So that's just my 2 cents on her and what I felt like talking about in today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, all of that jazz. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.